Thanks for tuning in for one of our Sunday messages. At Red, we're continuing to lean into our vision of being a church of passionate and committed disciples who are devoted to Jesus' alternative for the world. If you're inspired or encouraged by the ministry of our church, we'd love to have you join us. You can find out more at redchurch.au.
This is an exciting conversation. We, in this Beautiful Life series, have been looking at how God brings a beautiful coherence and order to our lives. And I think one area in which people feel like perhaps sometimes things are getting out of order, perhaps bringing a form of chaos, is our interaction with technology. Technology has a disruptive influence in the world at the moment. It brings so much good, yet sometimes it brings a lot of questions. So I thought it'd be really good to chat to someone who has thought a lot about this, who works in this interface between faith and technology. And that's my friend, James Kelly, who is from Canada. So thank you so much for joining us today, James.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Canadian A.
Yes.
I actually really love ice hockey and bacon. And so I feel like I'm very stereotypical Canadian. And I say A lot. And so I feel like I hit all the stereotypes.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure we have some Canadians in our church. I'm sure they're loving this part. We don't have much ice hockey, though. I think there's a few rinks around, but yeah, not exactly our national sport. But lovely to have you. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you live, family, and so on.
Yeah, so I live in a city just 1 hour west of Toronto. And so I've born and raised as a Canadian, tried to grow up as polite as I could, as every Canadian is raised to be. But yeah, I grew up, the Lord got a grip of my heart around 13 years old. I have this very powerful memory of sitting at the back of a church service with my dad, hearing the gospel in a way where it really gripped my soul, committed my life to Jesus, got baptized around that time, and entered into a season of in high school, really just like on fire for the Lord. So anyone watching this that's in high school, this can be one of the most rich, wonderful seasons of your life. And by the grace of God, it was for me. Went into university, had a challenging time there, but met my wife around that time. So we've been married 16 years. I have two little ones, a 7-year-old girl, 9-year-old boy. And a lot of our world is in our neighborhood, which maybe I'll get to tell a little bit of that story. And then also doing this ministry God's wildly called me to, called FaithTech, that is a very unexpected thing for me. But by God's grace, it's led to some really deep, meaningful stories of transformation that I've been able to be a part of. So that's a little bit about our family. Yeah.
So the idea of doing ministry in the tech space is a really interesting one. I think most people listening would agree that this is a place which needs ministry, needs the message of Jesus. Tell us more about how that began, what that looks like. It's spread across the world. Yeah, tell us that story.
Yeah, so the ministry is called FaithTech, and the faith in FaithTech is faith in Jesus, and so very much Jesus is everything for us. But it started extremely unexpectedly for me. So my wife and I we got married. I did a master's of divinity, thought we were going to go into the church planting world and full-time pastoring. And so we came alongside another family and we planted a church. And this was around 12 years ago. And we go and plant a church, but at the time, the Lord just had our hearts in such a wild, audacious place where we went around and we asked cab drivers in our city where they don't like to go. And we wanted to know in our city, where is everyone trying to leave? Because for some context, we spent some time living in South Sudan. We learned that we came back to our city of Waterloo, and we just felt like if we lived in a place and we just versus coming in and out of a place where there was a great poverty, it just wouldn't have a sustained effect. We call it parachute charity. I think that could be good, but God was just saying, Karen, James, I just want you to live in a place where it might feel uncomfortable, and you're not meant to be knight in shining armor, but just live in a place. I just really believe the gospel calls us to examine everything about us. So where we live, what we buy, how do we have a gospel lens through all decisions we make?
Mm.
So we end up in this one neighborhood we kept hearing about, and we're walking around the neighborhood, and there's these 3 high-rise apartment buildings. And so we go up to the lady and the manager, and we said, "Hey, is there any rooms available?" And she said, "Oh, let me go check." So she walks into the back room, Mark, and this other lady walks by. She goes, "What are you guys doing here?" Like, we looked a little outside of the neighborhood, maybe didn't fit in. We're like, "Well, we're looking to move in." She said, "Okay, see that big one over there, 80 Moorgate was the building name." She said, "Don't go to that one. Cops are there all the time. Drug deals, that's where everything, you don't want to move there. 50 Moorgate is quieter, larger hallways. You'll like that." She literally said, "Larger hallways, you'll like that." And so she leaves. This other lady comes back and she goes, "Great news. There's something available in 50. And Karen and I look at each other like, "We're just wondering if there's something available in 80. And she's like, "I don't think you heard me right." And so we ended up moving into this building, and wild, audacious stories. But what started happening is God started transforming our heart, because we started journeying with our friends who are on government assistance on at the end of every month. I get requests from my friends because money's run out, and God just started softening our heart. And so for the next 3 years, we're just doing life in our neighborhood. We still live in our same neighborhood to this day. And it was in the midst of this, I went to a conference and someone gave a talk. So the value of teaching. And he said, the phrase, he's talking about the gospel, but he said, in the midst of devastation, there's an opportunity for innovation and new things. He's talking about the cross. In the midst of the cross is opportunity for new life and new things. And I just remember thinking, what's that thing for my neighbor? In the midst of the darkness that I'm experiencing in my neighborhood, what's the opportunity for new things? And I started asking all these tech people I know in my city, "Hey, you're smart. You think about things differently. What should I do?" And what emerged was I met all these tech people that loved Jesus, that felt very alone and isolated and very underutilized with their skills. So one person said to me, they said, "James, I go to work and no one understands my faith. I'm afraid to talk about it in the tech sector. But then I go to church and no one understands my work because I speak like a different language. And my pastor keeps preaching how bad social media is. And I work at Facebook." I had one guy tell me that. So what do I do with that? I feel that tension. And then likewise, I had a friend who worked at Google, and she said, "James, I met with my pastor the other day, and my pastor said, 'Hey, don't you work at Google?' And she said, 'Yeah, I work at Google.' He said, 'Great. Can you run PowerPoint on Sunday? Like, you're at Google. You would be really good at PowerPoint.'" And she said to me, she goes, I want to serve I want to run, we need people running PowerPoint. It's a very important role. She said, "But I just also feel like maybe God's given me unique skills that can help advance the gospel in this world in the way he's uniquely designed me." And I remember we got a small group of people together at a coffee shop, and just it was unbelievable. People started seeing how could they collaborate to build technology together to advance the gospel. How could they live out the gospel in their workplace differently? Fast forward 8 years, FaithTech's now a city-based network. We've got about 50 communities around the world in 20 countries, and we meet in a city, and we think deeply on technology, and we eat together. And then a portion of us then volunteer our skills to build technology like that website and many other things to advance the gospel, to help people know Jesus, meet Jesus, go deep. We come alongside churches and cities to build for free for them. So think of it as like a network of creative tech people that think differently, that want to steward their skills in their minds to serve the church, to advance the gospel in the world. And by God's grace, it's happening, and we've had hundreds more say, can we do this around the world? And so we're just trying to steward it. It's a simple thing. And then along the way, God's taught us so much about how do we think differently as followers of Jesus in the world of technology that has an enormously disproportionate influence on the world, enormous. And how do we even build differently as followers of Jesus? How does the gospel permeate every aspect of life? How do I work differently because of the gospel? How do I build differently? How do I code differently? How do I type something differently? I just think the gospel must absolutely radically change everything about everything. And so, yeah, that's been a bit of our journey. Yeah.
In a moment, I'd love to ask you about what it's like going into some of these spaces where technology is developed. But just a question just arose as you shared that story, that it's just fascinating how the Lord works. And, you get to do ministry in the tech space, which is a place where there is such a focus of power, but also money, venture capital. You look at the stock market at the moment, it's run by, the Magnificent Seven of all the tech companies. Have you ever reflected on the fact that the Lord had you, doing ministry in South Sudan, a really challenged country, and then, in Waterloo, in this neighborhood which people are fleeing? How did the Lord use that to teach you being in those places where there is power and money?
Wow. Yeah, great question. I think one of the things is when you think about power, everything about Jesus absolutely reimagined power. And I love that. I heard recently one of the things about artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence are prediction machines. So they predict the best probability of the next thing that's going to come up. That would be the most likely response. Jesus, in every case but one, answered a question unexpectedly. The one time he did was when he said the great commandment. What is it? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. And then he says, and he still adds something. Love your neighbor as yourself. So he still reimagined that. But in all these other cases, Jesus was unexpected. And in the world of AI, it's so rooted in what is expected. And I love that about Jesus. And so when you get into these circles of power, where we believe one vision of power in the world of technology is whoever holds the most data ultimately gets to shape users in society in a direction that they want. We have to firstly dismantle that vision. We talk about a definition of impact in the world. We got this from our friend Andy Crouch, is that the world's definition of impact is an equation, which is F over T, and that's force over time. So build something with the greatest amount of force in the shortest period of time, and you'll have the greatest impact. Every tech startup thinks, how do I get as many users as possible so I can sell that company? Well, that whole vision is trying to gain power, gain data, gain things, and then extort that power to gain for yourself. And then you look at Jesus's model of impact, and you realize it's actually F to the power of time, and it's friendship to the power of time. So he takes a small group over a long period of time, shapes them, molds them, goes deep with them, dies on a cross, comes back to life, and sends them on a mission. And so Jesus' definition of impact is very different than the world's. And so I think just some of those experience for me of realizing moving into our neighborhood was always a call of friendship to the power of time leads to depth, leads to meaning, leads to the things that we're really after. And how do we not buy into the world's definition of impact, which is do something really big as fast as possible? And that's, it's like the huge event. To me, a huge event should be a celebration of what all has been done, rather than how do we, like you often say, how do we stir revival? It's like, well, hold on, revival is not an event.
Mm,
This is a work of God
mm,
that just
mm,
takes place and you're faithfully obedient to him. And so,
mm,
yeah, maybe those experiences God gave my wife and I over this time has been really to reimagine based off of the gospel and the way of
mm,
Jesus what power really is and what impact really is, which is typically the opposite
mm,
of the world, the
mm,
countercultural vision. And so if it all makes sense to the world, usually we should be questioning that a little bit,
mm,
because the way of Jesus usually sits counterculturally.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. There's so much wisdom in there. I think you need to go back
Mm,
and work through that. It's just, yeah, that's such a
mm,
compelling vision and alternate to the world, to what we see in the world. So when
mm,
you are at these spaces, you go to Silicon Valley, visit people at these big tech companies. I guess to the outsider, they can seem like these gigantic forces. I don't know, filled with robots or people trying to reprogram us. What's your experience of actually going there, and in particular,
mm.
ministering to believers who are working in these spaces?
Right. Well, one of the most hopeful things I heard when getting into faith tech in the world of technology was the vast majority of big tech companies have a community of devout followers of Jesus trying to live missionally there.
Mm,
So, in just a few weeks, we are gathering a small group of leaders in Silicon Valley from so every major tech company, almost all of them, have what's called an employment resource group, and they create a leadership, like a steering committee, and then they all have these small groups happening around the world. So Google has a steering committee of 5 leaders, and they have 60 small groups meeting every week around the world in Google locations, praying together, studying the word together, on mission to live out the gospel there. By God's grace, we're gathering leaders from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, NVIDIA, and a few others to say, how do we spend a weekend together, worship the Lord together, reimagine technology together, and then help them build a 1 year kind of vision, direction of how to be missionaries in big tech?
mm,
I'm amazed that we get the opportunity to be in this space, Mark.
mm,
But these followers of Jesus are trying to navigate a very complex world, which is a place of enormous influence that's driven by what I would call the gospel of tech. This idea
mm,
of, we call something the killer app trap, technicism, solutionism, the idea of technology will save us. So the heartbeat of techs, uh, I would say an idle posture is that technology is going to save the world.
yeah.
And herein lies in steps followers of Jesus that know and need to be trained more, though, but know there's a gospel vision that's something different. And I just come away from those conversations so encouraged because there's brothers and sisters that see, rather than fleeing Meta, we look at Facebook and many of us go, it's destructive, but then we might still be on it. So there's some
Mm,
hypocrisy often happening. But we can see it and be like, this is reckless. Move fast, break things is the ultimate response, is going to be destructive. And so we need to destroy it. And by the grace of God, there are people that see that as a mission field
mm,
and say, how do we actually be there to engage people, bring about the gospel? So I know of a team at Meta that pray over Mark Zuckerberg every week.
wow.
They aren't laying hands on him physically,
Mm,
but they
mm,
go to his office and they pray over him. He knows they're
mm,
there. He sees
mm,
them every week,
mm,
but they're just like, we're going to pray over this man, that he meets
mm,
Jesus, that he loves Jesus, and that radically changes his worldview and changes the way the biggest technology use of the world. Like, how many
mm,
billions use Facebook now on a daily
mm,
basis? I think it's 2.5, 3 billion people every day. The power of that is enormous.
mm,
So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing there's
mm,
the idolatry of tech that is deep and dark, and I see the light of believers in those spaces that are trying to see that God has called me here to bring light into this place. And so I always say, let's pray for those leaders. Let's pray that God inspires them to be courageous in the place God's called them. So, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that's the world of the creators who are creating this technology. Most people listening in our congregations today will be users of this technology. Very few won't be users. I mean, almost everyone interacts with this technology. Increasingly, as the internet becomes part of our everyday life. So I would love to just ask for some of your wisdom on us as users. And I guess the first place I'd love to start is not everyone, but some of the people listening are parents whose kids are coming of age in this technological age. You're a parent, I'm a parent.
Yeah.
How do you guide your children with wisdom in what is a very different world and in a rapidly changing world with artificial intelligence coming and everything? I think as we speak, a lot of ears are pricking up in the congregation, ready to hear.
We lost them for the last little while, but okay. So I think my first thought that honestly came to my mind has nothing to do with technology, and then I'll share a few practical things we've been trying in our family based off the things I'm learning. When COVID hit, so my kids are 7 and 9, so this was 4 years ago, right? God gave us a practice to start in our family. I would feel like the best decision I've possibly like top 3 best decisions of my life, which was every morning at breakfast, we got out the Bible and we just read a passage and we had very simple conversation around it. And the reason I'm bringing this up in the context of technology is I just believe that for that practice, my kids were watching Dad read the Bible every day. And it prioritized that the daily thing we make a greatest priority is the Word of God and prayer. So that's, I think, like a non-answer to the question mark. But I just want to share that as a dad of young kids, is if there's any other parent with younger kids or teenagers, like greatest practice, the best outcomes, greatest conversations, just that daily rhythm in the morning. Practically, I mean, no child under 2 should see a screen. So that's the best data. The data is so evidentially clear that no child. So if anyone in the church has a child that's 1.5, 2, and they're using an iPad on screens, please, it's everything. It's worth the cost of the challenge of dealing with that 2-year-old to get off technology. I would even encourage up to 4 based off the data. There's no screens at all. The brain needs to develop, and the way the screens are. My friend, Josh Banco, invented the iPad. So it's this really fascinating story behind the scenes where he made the first prototype and Steve Jobs looked at it. He's like, this is rubbish, no good. But he believed in it. So he kept working on it for like 6 months. And then Steve Jobs is like in his office. They're just chatting. He's like, what's this? He's like, I just kept working on this on the side. Looks at it, talks. He's like, all right, let's build it. It was the iPad.
Wow.
And he told me once, he said, and this was when I think he wasn't following Jesus yet. He said, a lot of people, particularly parents and grandparents, are amazed that like a 2-year-old or 5-year-old can use an iPad. They're like, they're a genius. This is magic. He's like, I designed it so a 2-year-old can use it. Your child's not phenomenal. It was designed so simple for a 2-year-old to use it. So that was just a reminder. And the vast majority of Silicon Valley executives put their kids in schools where there are no screens. That should startle us. And so anyway, my practice for our family real practically is, no screens when they were really young. And then it's just some simple things so our internet turns off every night at 10 p.m. So you can buy tools to use this. It can be very simple. There's multiple ways you can search online how to do this, but I recommend to every family that I interact with, turn your internet off every night. And people are like, what? Turn the internet off? I don't have access to all the world's knowledge all the time. It's like, yes, it's good for you. So the number of nights, Mark, my wife and I are both on our computers working, and then the internet shuts off. And then I come down the stairs,
Mm,
she comes out, and we're like, okay, time to go to
mm,
bed,
mm,
is really beautiful. So that's been a structure we've brought into our life. And then maybe the last one practically that was a game changer for my life is about 6 years ago, I was in my living room one day, and my son, who was very young, 3, 4, came up to me, and I was on my phone. And he
mm,
said, Dad, Dad, Dad. And I kind of startled. And he's like, get off your phone. He
mm,
said to me, I'm like, are these his first words? What is it? And I really felt convicted. I
mm,
was on my phone a lot, and I was on it
mm,
at home. And, and so what the Lord led me to do is take a digital Sabbath.
mm,
So it's one day a week with no digital technology. So you can have a microwave or a fridge, but no screens. And I did this for 3 months. It was every Saturday night to Sunday night, no digital technology. It was unbelievable,
mm.
so freeing. So we ended up actually turning this into like, who else wants to take the digital Sabbath challenge?
Mm.
And New York Times picked it up, and all these people started
Wow.
saying, I want to get free of technology. And God calls us to a Sabbath rest.
Mm,
And I think a rest from technology is exactly a very good practice. So,
mm,
what are the boundaries? What are the guardrails? What are the limitations? Andy Crouch's book, Tech Wise Family, is I
mm,
highly
mm,
recommend it. Extremely good book on this topic. His daughter wrote a book called The Tech Wise Life for teenagers. That's also
mm,
excellent.
mm,
And they just talk about what are the boundaries and limits rooted in the gospel.
mm,
And the idea there is, who has the power? Do you have
mm,
the power over technology, or does the technology have the power over you? Can you put it down? Can you be away from it? And things like having it off, Sabbath, these are practices as followers of Jesus we must have alongside our spiritual practices
mm,
as faithful followers of Jesus. And so I think it's those, maybe a few of those things, Mark, might move us in the right direction to say, no, no, no,
mm,
technology is not the thing that is going to control me and my
mm,
family. I'm going to put it in its proper place. And so, yeah.
mm. Oh, that's fantastic. That is really helpful for families, but all of us, regardless of
Yeah.
your life situation,
Yeah.
interact with technology from our phones to social media, streaming. What's some good
Mm,
habits you've learned, as a follower of
mm.
Jesus, how to use technology well, but not let it, in a sense, use you? What would be just helpful general advice for people?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things I do think, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, just social media. Um,
Mm,
when you get inside of big tech, all that scary stuff you hear about the anxious generation and how technology is built, it truly is built uh, primarily to give you more connections, but not necessarily deep connections.
mm,
I think the thing we all need is a few really deep connections, not a whole bunch of surface level connections.
mm,
You know, the way of Jesus, he had 3 people he was extremely close with. Then he had
mm,
12. Then he had the 120. And then he had the masses. And he communicated differently with all of them.
mm,
With the masses, he was in and out. Oftentimes they left him after
mm,
he preached. So his goal was to share and teach to them, but it was never to be tight and close with them.
mm,
Then the 120 would gather with him and move with him. But he let the 12 in a way that no one else did. And he even let 3 more in that
mm,
the rest didn't get, the other
mm,
9 didn't. And I think Jesus's model of like, I'm going really deep with a few, that's what's going to change the world.
mm,
It really should be the same model for us. And so
mm,
when we think of technology, the allure and the technology is built so that
mm,
we meet as many people as possible, connect with as many as possible,
mm,
because the algorithms give you benefit for that.
mm,
Um, and just simple things in the social media category again is, it changed early on. You would stop you would go through your feed and it would stop, and that's
mm,
changed. That changed quite a long
mm,
time ago, where it's endless.
mm,
That's not the way we're built as humans. Things are supposed to end. We're supposed to have a conclusion to things. And so if our interaction with technology, whether that's watching TV, there's always going to be a show on. And they're now building it in such a way where they entice you more than ever to watch the next thing.
mm,
I just think the practice is there for me. I'm not on like social media. I've actually
mm,
pulled out. I have one tool, which is LinkedIn for me,
mm,
which the feed's all professional stuff. It's not as enticing for me. I've had to pull out, and I think some people are called to be there.
mm,
But the way I would interact, and this is the last thing I would say, anything technology wise this is I think a really hard one for us is,
mm,
this has been a conviction of mine, is accountability in the way of Jesus isn't an accountability partner. It's a way of life.
mm,
So how do you ensure that there's always someone aware of everything you're doing?
mm,
So if you're on social, can you actually let someone know you're going there? I try to, if I'm going to speak somewhere, go to somewhere, just even interacting at home. Hey, Karen, this is what I'm doing now
mm,
for the next hour. This is my plan. Come in anytime.
mm,
There's that open door. Like, you can come in, interrupt at any time. What's on my phone, I announce to my kids,
mm,
this is what I'm doing on my phone. If I'm using my phone in the living room, let's say. Certainly no technology at the dinner table. That is an
mm,
absolute no. No technology in rooms, Mark. The
mm,
bedroom should have zero technology in it. That is a place of rest.
mm,
Uh, for married couples, that's a place of intimacy. Technology should not be in those spheres, in those
mm,
places. And
mm,
I would even encourage you, look at your room. Andy Crouch talks about this. In so many houses, we walk in and all the furniture and everything is oriented around something. It's usually a screen. So
mm,
everything's shaped and guided around this thing we all converge on.
mm,
And just like examine our physical space. Is it
mm,
oriented around
mm,
screens, or is it oriented around conversation without it?
mm,
And so anyway, there's a few things in there that just
mm.
felt jumbled a little
No,
bit,
that was
but
great. There's lots of wisdom there.
yeah.
I guess just lastly, this series has been about how do we bring a beautiful coherence or order. And in Genesis, we see
Mm,
what God does is he brings order to chaos. And,
yeah.
we have many people listening who in their jobs, some who work in tech, but others who use technology in their jobs. There's very few jobs now which don't use technology. So
Yeah.
as, people following Jesus, people interested in following Jesus, exploring that, we've got all different people who are at different stages of faith. But how
Mm,
do we actually together bring that beautiful order to our workplaces when we interact with technology?
mm,
What have you learned that's helpful in that space?
yeah, that's really good. I think first thing what came to my mind is Genesis 1. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the
Mm,
earth. That's a Hebrew word, bara.
mm,
And it's a very profound, beautiful, deep word because it's exclusive to God. It's only
mm,
used in the context of God. And he is the ultimate creator.
mm,
Like, he created the heavens and the earth. And I think that when we get into our work and our everyday
mm,
life in the workplace, I think so much of the time we can lose sight of the fact that God has gifted me this place to work,
mm,
that he is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Meaning, to me, that means as we build, as we work, as we interact with even the people in our workplace, like, God is the king. He's the one who created your colleagues.
mm,
We are image bearers of his. And so, to me, having a mentality that what I am called to do in my work around technology, in technology, but even just using technology in the workplace, is my absolute fundamental calling is to
mm,
bear the image of God, knowing he created the heavens and the earth. And my responsibility as the created one is to point to him. So
mm,
as we build and as we create and as we work, how do you build in such a way that you can point to the thing and say, this is reflective of God as the creator. This is reflective of me as an image bearer. So I think that gets into conversations like, how do you do your work with excellence? How do you honor God? But I would just encourage people then to take that and say, I fundamentally think we would work very differently if we believed a simple thing, which is, how do we take a sacrificial posture in the workplace? Because God created us, we're created by him, and he showed us the ultimate way through his life, death, and resurrection on the cross to give of ourselves, even when it benefits someone else. And so I think there's moments in work when you might do something and you gain no recognition, and you just let someone else be praised and gain that recognition. How do you take a sacrificial posture in your work? And I think if we did more of that, I think you would also go back to our power dynamic conversation. I mean, in the places of work, you might lose your job by giving of yourself, but you honor God. And what do you gain from that? You gain everything from that. So anyway, I think, in the places of work, take a sacrificial posture should be our primary ethos as followers of Jesus.
Well, thank you so much. That this has just been filled with so much wisdom, and I think there's so much in this, and just so much helpful, advice. But godly way you've thought through this. We're so appreciative. I'm so glad. Often when I think of you, I'm just glad to know that you're out there in these spaces, and to hear that you and others are praying through these things, and really what is the cutting edge of what's creating so much of the world, so much of culture and society. So, I will continue to pray for you, and I invite all those watching to pray for you as you go into these spaces for wisdom, discernment, protection for you and your family. And we just really want to honor what you're doing, and we're so grateful to know that you're doing this and that God's working through you. So thank you so much for the time you spent with us here this morning and tonight at Red. Thank you so much.